to Ancient Faith Radio, your Orthodox Internet radio connection.
Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Louh, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. My name is Father Nicholas Louh. Such a pleasure to have you here with us. I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And tonight I'm joined by my lovely wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Louh.
So great to be with you all tonight.
Roxanne's a clinical psychologist, and several years ago we began this show with the hope and the intent of doing a show that merges both faith and psychology to kind of give you some pragmatic and applicable ways to apply your faith on a day-to-day basis. We call it practical Christianity that merges both faith and psychology. So we're so grateful that you're joining us, and hopefully by the end of tonight's show, we've kind of given you some steps, some seeds that you can water in your own life to help you grow closer to Christ. Before we dive into tonight's topic, I do want to encourage you, as we do this every single week, to take advantage and stay connected to us by joining our social media platforms. Friends, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and all under the headings of The Louhs. And that last name is spelled Louhs. In fact, all of our sermons are archived on our Louhs YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to that, go ahead and do that right now. Again, go to youtube.com and then just put The Louhs in the search engine, and you'll be able to get access to our sermons. As well as several years ago, we also began sending out what we call our daily inspirational messages. And again, very similar to what we do on our show, they're just practical steps, little seeds that we can give you to help you and guide you through your day. Many people are receiving these every day through their email inbox. If you aren't receiving them, you can go to our website at thelouhs.com and click the link subscribe. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address. So again, just go to thelouhs.com, click on the subscribe button, and all you have to do is simply put in your email address.
And I just want to shout out to all of you who have written in about those inspirational messages. Your emails have just been transformational, and we are just filled with humble gratitude in hearing your responses and your requests for certain themes and topics. And so we just love the engagement. And again, just shout out to all of you who've written in. We're just so thankful to hear from you all.
Absolutely. We're very, very fortunate. And we love knowing that it's actually making a difference in your lives. So thanks again for those who have responded. And if you are receiving them, do us a favor. If you find them beneficial, share them with your friends and your family. In fact, on every one of our daily messages, there's a little link at the very top of the post that you can just simply click on, and it'll forward it to any of your friends and family. So definitely take advantage of that. I'm so excited about tonight's show, but before I introduce to you our speaker, I do want to invite you, as we do every week, to join the conversation. We truthfully believe that growth happens in conversation. And so we invite you to call us tonight. If you've got a question or a comment, you can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And we're also simultaneously broadcasting the show on our Louhs Facebook page as well as Ancient Faith's Facebook page. So if you're tuning in and listening to us on those platforms, feel free to leave a comment in the comment line. We'll definitely try to get to it before the end of the show. So as many of you know, Roxanne and I have two children. One is age 15 and the other is 13. And so for us, we do a lot of shows really geared towards youth, because for us, we're looking out on the vast canvas of this country and truly concerned. We love being in this country. We love the blessings that it provides for us, the freedom that it gives to all of us. But when we look out and we're deeply concerned because we're seeing our youth facing so many stresses from all over. We see a world itself that's telling them to compromise on their morals and their values. I often tell people who are older, I will say that so many struggles that they're facing, not to mention those that are the pressures by their academics, as well as pressures at home. Because of this, when we look at the landscape of our youth, we can see some of the highest levels of anxiety and depression that we have seen in recent past. We're seeing studies after studies reveal that they are more and more disconnected from Christ and the church. So what do we do about it? How do we help our youth? Joining me today is a very dear friend, Dr. Greg Abdalah, who serves as the pastoral assistant at St. George Antiochian Orthodox Church in Phoenix, Arizona. But let me tell you a little bit about him. Greg is a native of the Pittsburgh area and began his college career at Duquesne University studying music education, during which time he gained theoretical knowledge and practical experience in how children learn, ultimately graduating with a Bachelor of Music and Vocal Performance. During that time, he also worked in various positions at the Antiochian village, applying what he was learning at Duquesne. Following graduation, Greg worked as the deanery coordinator for the Western Pennsylvania Deanery of the Orthodox Church. And while there, he was often invited to speak at various camps and youth retreats around the U.S. and Canada. Upon graduation, he worked at St. George Antiochian Orthodox Cathedral in Worcester, Mass. until 2014, where he became the youth pastor at St. George Antiochian Church, where he currently serves as the pastoral assistant. In 2018, he earned his doctorate of ministry from St. Vladimir Seminary, focused on teaching the doctorate of ministry faculty at St. Vladimir's Seminary, and named assistant professor of pastoral theology, where he focuses on youth ministry. He and his beautiful wife, Diana, are the proud parents of 2 children, and we're so excited, Greg, that you're joining us. So welcome to Live with the Louhs. I think we may have a little bit of a disconnect. Let me just check with our producer. Matushka, are we able to get Greg on the call? Okay. So we seem to have some technical difficulties with that. But what I do want to share with all of you, though, is that as we look out and see the youth, what they're going through, I can't imagine, just the struggles that they're facing.
Are battling. It's the most common mental health disorder facing kids today. Depression follows next. 3 million teens are experiencing depression. Kids are in spiritual crisis around some of the issues that they're not really sure how to make sense of. They're witnessing in...
Hey, Greg, how are you?
Hey, Greg, we got you back.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
Not a problem. We were just, obviously introducing you, but also just talking about really the landscape of what our youth are going through. And I just really want to kind of dig right into these questions that we have for you. And first is, you've been doing youth ministry for a long time. What is an area that you're seeing that we are not doing enough of to help our youth, whether that be from a parenting perspective or even the church?
I think first and foremost, you talked about some of the work I did with my doctor of ministry focus on teaching the liturgy. And really the point in that was we do a really good job of giving our kids definitions to answers of questions that we think they're asking or that we think they need answers to. But then when it comes time to actually making them a part of the church itself, we tell them they're the church of the future. They're the future of the church, and we have them waiting in the wings. We don't actually give them anything tangible to be a part of the church of the now. And it goes completely against everything that we see in the text of the liturgy and the text of the baptismal service, in the life of the church. I mean, the life of the church is an active and living church, and our youth are full participants in that activity in life. And yet we somehow put them in the wings waiting.
So, I mean, would you say that with regards to the liturgy, the service itself, or the overall foundation of how they approach faith through all the ministries?
I think the answer to that is yes. I think it's everything. I think it's they come with real questions, and we often shy away from them. We're uncomfortable with them. We're with the tough questions, or we just simply give them some type of pat answer to make them go away, and we don't actually engage with them. And they see that as us shutting them down. But in the Orthodox way, I had this quote up in the teen room in our church. It's still there. Metropolitan Callisto says that we see that it is not the task of Christianity to provide easy answers to every question, but to make us progressively aware of a mystery. And when we just give them these easy answers, because that's what we think they need, and they're just going to take it because I said so, we're doing a disservice. They're engaging. And if we're not engaging with them, they're going to engage somewhere else. They're going to engage with a world that is telling them to indulge everything that passes through their mind as a passing fancy. One of the casinos here in Phoenix, we laugh all the time because its slogan is "You do you." And we're in the middle of the Lenten period, where the slogan of Lent is "You don't do you. You get away from that. You move beyond that. You focus more on Christ." And like, when we just tell our kids, yeah, this is the quick answer. You need to take communion because it's the body and blood of Christ, but we don't actually give any anything to that. We don't actually put any meat on those bones. They're going to go somewhere that will.
Yeah, I do think that, I think we have to recognize that, this generation today is being raised in a consumer-driven culture. They're accustomed to finding the best
Without
products in every
question.
venue, right? I mean, social media, makes life, infinitely customizable. And teens are used to exercising a lot of control over what they take in, where they take it in, and they want to make that the most efficient, the most interesting, and they can in every other sense of the word. And I don't know if as parents or as churches that, we do a very good job addressing convictions with conversation, where we're really willing to dive into the crisis of faith that some of them are experiencing. And, we're not really willing to disciple them theologically and to sort of help them engage in some of these more broader conversations about what are the foundations and the tenets of our faith. Why does our church have the church fathers and other churches don't? What is the interpretation of our Bible versus other people's Bibles? Like, why do we take communion every week where other churches might only offer that twice a year? And I'm not sure where that where the blame falls. I don't know that it's a blame. It's as much as it is just variables that I think we're not used to digesting and conversating around. And what we do, I think sometimes, is end up kind of shaming kids into having these questions or having these convictions, as opposed to sort of opening the conversation, putting words on the experience, and helping them delve deeper in what is an absolutely beautiful faith. That isn't something we need to defend. It's just something we need to engage.
Well, and I think you hit on something huge right there at the end. Our church is an experiential church. Our worship is an experiential worship. And everywhere else in the world, they're talking about how important it is to have experiences in education and focus on experiential learning. And we have that. Everything in the liturgy is there to teach us. We have all of that right there. We just need to open our youth's eyes to it. And then you brought up discipleship. We need to recognize the importance of relationships in that experience and in that process. It can't just be the parents. It certainly can't just be your Sunday school teacher for 30 minutes a Sunday. There needs to be more going on than just that is going to help engage our youth. And like you said, we live in a consumer society. We also live in a highly narcissistic society that everything is focused on self, and our youth think that the world revolves around them. Like I have a 2.5-year-old and we have a 1-month-old. Seeing the 2.5-year-old, who is used to having the whole world revolve around her, now adjust to having another child in the house that also needs mom and dad's attention, that also needs our focus, that also needs our love, that we're sharing that love with, is how she's going to, hopefully, we'll find out as she gets older, get through that childish narcissism that exists just by virtue of when there's only one child, they are the center of everything. But at some point we all have to get through that and all move through that. But when everything around you is focusing you back onto yourself, it becomes very difficult to get through that.
Well, and I think too, as you're, just as we're sharing with our listeners, and let me just give a plug to encourage our listeners to call in. If you have a question for Dr. Greg, you can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. We're speaking with Dr. Greg Abdalah. He is an assistant professor of pastoral theology with a focus in youth ministry, and also serves as the pastoral assistant at St. George Antiochian Orthodox Church in Phoenix, Arizona. I think for a lot of people too, Greg, what we're seeing is, what back in the day we would say that, we're losing our young adults, and, because, as they got out into college and had much more, freedom, that there was this, this level of just exploring. And then you have the families and the establishing of relationships, getting into your career, all these different factors that would kind of reflect a decline in that particular age group's involvement in the church. But now what we're seeing is that actually is starting to move even younger, where we're seeing, adolescents who are less inclined to be involved in church, less involved and inclined to be in the worship. And we're watching, I think one of the things that we need to talk about is, I think you beautifully mentioned this with the, how we're living in a world that's all about me, and we talk about selfies, and everything's about like how I look and how many likes I have and how many followers I have. But we're also seeing, the culture around us with social media, where they have access to quote unquote news. I would argue some of it's fake news, but news that kind of is shaping what they're doing and how they should be living in an area that 10 or 15 years ago we were not necessarily having to deal with. And I think maybe you could speak a little bit to just, obviously there's some pros to social media. We're broadcasting this show on social media, but can you kind of share, what in your youth, in your experiences in your academics, but also in your professional experience, the pros and the cons for our parents who may be tuning in with social media?
I think we definitely have to make sure that we have time to unplug. While social media is awesome, in the sense that what you can do with it and the reach that you can have with it. We do the same thing here in Phoenix. We have a project that we've been working on called the Warrior Saint Movement, and we go live every single morning with a 5 to 6 minute biblical teaching that we broadcast on Facebook and YouTube. It's the way that information is getting out there. We saw in Egypt a whole revolution happen around social media, or on social media, through however you want to say it. Like, it has a potential for such great reach, but it also becomes a huge time suck, and it also becomes something that pulls us so out of actual reality. John Card Larcher wrote a book called The New Media Epidemic that came out a few years ago. And he talks in it about television, but then he gets into other forms of media. And he says that these forms of media draw us to participate and identify with its message. That is the goal of all of these medias. And if we're constantly being bombarded by that media, and the message that is associated with them, and that message is inherently not the message of the church, then we have to give them something else. Now, the flip side of that is, as the church, we have to actually give something else. We can't just be presenting a church that is inherently infused by my own personal political beliefs, and then I package Jesus into whatever that looks like so that I can broadcast that out to the world. We need to actually be presenting the God that we know to be a God who is alive, and a God who loves us, and a God who created us, and a God who brings us. By comparison, Schmemann talks about the sacraments that the church offers us as gifts, and the liturgical acts in which the church itself identifies with the gifts. So we have an identity issue. Are we going to focus only on social media, or do we want to look at the identity that the church is giving us, which are these gifts from God. At camps are so successful all over the place, and everything about camp, should not be successful. The kids show up, they give all of their electronic devices away. They have to clean their dirty cabins. They have to go to church twice a day, which is different than, for some of these kids, more church than they go to in the first day than they might have in the month preceding it.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no contact with the outside world. They have to follow a very strict schedule and a very strict set of rules. And they love it. And they're crying by the last day, and they don't want to go home. And, it's antithetical to everything else that we're seeing. And when we only focus on social media, we lose sight of that. We take selfies on our iPhones and look on our social media on our iPads and our iPhones and our iMacs and our I. Everything is focused on ourselves. When we unplug from that, we can actually focus on something outside of ourselves.
What's interesting is that, research has found that, these kids have more access to connection than any other generation in the history of time, but yet they're the most lonely and disconnected that generation that we've seen, which is just, sort of interesting. I mean, we do have this sort of access, but what it becomes, I'm not sure. But
it's false connection. To your point, I mean, it's loneliness because it's completely false connection. It's synthetic, and we're real people who are in relationship with a real God. And having all these false connections then morph our ability to have any other kinds of actual true connections with people. I'm sorry, I cut you off, Presbytera, but they're false. Like, they're not real connections. My friends on Facebook, I don't know all of them. How can they be my friends if I don't even know them? I mean, people might like a picture that I post of my kids, and I have to go back and see who that person is. Now, there might be other friends from high school that I am able to reconnect with, or people that I haven't seen in years that I'm able to reconnect with and stay up with. Fine. But then what happens when I actually see those people? You ask questions about what's going on in life, and you tell the other person what's going on in their life because of what you saw on their Facebook page.
Absolutely. I have a question.
Now Snapchat's even faster.
Right.
Yeah, Snapchat. That's a whole nother show. I have a question that came in here. It reads, I have 4 kids between the ages of 3 and 7, and beyond disturbed by what is happening in the world with regards to sexuality and agendas around homosexuality, specifically transgender. I don't get the sense that the Orthodox Church has taken a strong stance on this, and it worries me for children. How is the Church addressing this, and how do we help our kids with this very big idea? I'll open that up to you, Dr. Greg.
Yeah, I'm just processing. The reality is that it's an identity issue. And we don't want to talk about that. We want the church to fit into the box that we want it to fit in. So I agree with a sermon that aligns with what I think, rather than hearing a sermon to allow me to be challenged to change in the way that sermon might be challenging me to change. There are some parts of the country where the church takes a very strong stand and is highly criticized for that strong stand. There's other parts of the country where the church is lax and is told it's taking too hard of a stand. So what is what? As we need to divorce ourselves as Orthodox Christians from this idea of American politics, because so many of these issues that have become political issues that we think we have to align with, whether it be a woke agenda or a conservative agenda or whatever, they're church issues that have been usurped by the political sphere and taken out of the context of the church. When we're able to actually have an honest conversation with them, with these issues or about these issues, it happens when first and foremost we devoid ourselves of this idea, or divorce ourselves from this idea of my political beliefs say X, therefore my church beliefs need to fit in line with X. You see it with the abortion debate, with the transgender debate, with the homosexual agenda debate. It's fine, but the church is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, Republican or Democrat. The church, all are one in Christ. When we start from that point, then we can actually have an honest conversation. And when we have an honest conversation, we might be surprised. And when we have an honest conversation with our youth, we might even be surprised. But they're getting told from the other side, like they're hearing about it at schools. They're hearing about it from their friends. They're hearing about it on TV, on social media, on everything, that you know, if a child sees something on the internet that maybe they shouldn't be seeing, and they get a little bit excited by this, and then they're being told you have to explore that idea, and the church just says, no, you're bad for exploring anything, and just like everything gets shut down and gets conversation is completely lost. I don't know if I'm even answering the question.
Yeah, I mean, what we really need to do is stay very close to these individuals who are, you know, in identity formation. I mean, I think what's important to recognize too, I mean, just from a developmental standpoint, adolescents go through a developmental stage called identity formation. I mean, this is what they're supposed to do. They are, you know, trying on different hats to discover who they are, where they're going to feel accepted, and what they can be noticed for. Like, this is what they're doing, the who, the where, and the what. They don't have a solid sense of self. And so it creates incredible anxiety, instability, moodiness, uncertainty, and security. So if a certain peer group accepts them, gives them a sense of belonging, well, guess what? That's what I'm going to try on because I fit there. Or that other group over there, I didn't fit. And so in trying on different hats, it is part of that sort of developmental stage. And I think, you know, too often, because these conversations are scary for us, you know, we kind of put up our hands and put a big brick wall. And as you just so eloquently said, we're not having the conversations, we're not drawing near. We're scared of these ideas and notions, but those hats are being put on because that's where they belong, and where we have to help them feel the belonging is in the church. You know, and also moral development, that's also not during adolescence evolved yet, right? They're following social order because somebody important to me told me I had to, not because of a defined sense of their own values and principles, right? So those have not come into fruition yet. And so, you know, again, if we're not staying close to those who are trying on all of these different aspects of identity, we lose them because they're going to belong somewhere else. Someone else will give them that sense of belonging. And I think that's where we lose when we're sort of unwilling to have these really important conversations.
Right. And I think to piggyback on that, one of the biggest things that ends up happening in those other communities that might be accepting is they say this is what actual community looks like. And anything that doesn't look exactly like what we've now defined community as, and what you've now identified with as your community, is not only to be rejected, it's to be gone after. It's to go after it. And we see kids that want to go after the church because they want to just make it look like what they think the world is supposed to look like and look like everything else. And then we see when they get away from everything else, that's why I love the camp example, when they're actually outside of everything else and in an actual community that is actually based on the true community that the church provides, everything is different because they're not asking the questions, who am I? Where do I fit? What difference can I make? Is this really for me? You know, and a lot of that stuff starts the data, as you pointed out, is that it's happening in adolescence. Because of that, I think when we were in the crisis of we're losing our young adults in the church, I think we were looking at the wrong age group. By the
Right.
time they're young adults, everything's formed.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And when our kids start asking questions, to actually have a mature faith and start making the faith their own, when they're in those adolescent processes of identity and everything forming who they are. We just expect them to keep this very naive and juvenile faith that is, I go to church because it's the faith of my parents. We never tell them to take the faith their own. You know,
And we're also and we're obviously speaking about people that are already coming to church. I mean, we're not even addressing those that are not even involved or engaged or have never experienced the camp experience or for that matter, an active, alive, engaged church. And so it's definitely concerning. So I think what you're bringing up, Greg, is so important for our parents and our church leaders to also recognize is that, you know, in the absence of leadership, chaos tends to happen. I mean, if we don't, you know, if we don't define what that looks like, someone else will. If they don't decide what a Christian should be and how they should live and how they should operate and experience Christ, you know, I love telling people that Christianity is not what we do; it's what we're becoming. We're constantly becoming, as we say, theosis. You know, this constant growth that we're having of tearing off the old and becoming the new. But I think that what we're touching on, and I'm so happy that emailer sent that in, because I think that we hear you and we know what the concerns of what are happening. But I think also as a church, and as a community, the conversation is so important that we begin to really have that, because it's happening with or without our participation in it. You're listening to Live with the Louhs, and tonight we're speaking with Dr. Gregory Abdalah. He is the Assistant Professor of Pastoral Theology at St. Vladimir's Seminary, focuses on youth ministry, and he's also serves as the pastoral assistant at St. George Antiochian Orthodox Church in Phoenix, Arizona. He's got a tremendous wealth of experience and knowledge on youth ministry, and for this reason, we wanted to have him on our show tonight, and we invite you to join the conversation. You can call and speak with Dr. Greg by calling us at 1-855-237-2346, 1-855-237-2346, or you can email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. You know, Greg, you talk about reclaiming the community, and you speak about this often. That would imply that the community has been lost. Where did that start?
I think in a lot of ways, the loss of community kind of shifted as immigration and the needs of the people started to shift. You know, the church in the United States became a nucleus and a center for everyone's social engagement. As people started leaving kind of being just an immigrant community and becoming more and more integrated within the U.S., and as the U.S. started becoming more and more of a melting pot, we didn't need the church for the same things we used to. We now had PTAs, we now had all these other things. And then you add to that this idea of keeping up with the Joneses. You know, as we leave the cities and start moving out into suburbs in these, you know, gated communities and walled off communities, people don't trust each other. We have enough things in the world that show us that people just aren't really trusting each other right now. It becomes really hard to then just be open to God's love and be open to the true community that the church provides, when we think we're getting it somewhere else because we need it from something else. And we need it from something else so that we can keep up with everyone else and be like everyone else. The church, I mean, St. Paul says in Romans, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, in chapter 12. And this idea of transformation is scary. It becomes much easier to conform, becomes way easier to just try to be like everyone else, and fitting in with everyone else might mean that we're doing things that are different, that we're going to go, you know, make sure our kids are on the right soccer team so that they're out all the time. And if that means that we miss a couple of Sundays, you know, so be it. And we make this agreement with ourselves that I'm just going to miss a couple Sundays for soccer, which then it turns into I'm only going to church a couple Sundays a year because of soccer. And we've completely inverted the paradigm. When we couple that with not allowing the church to be a place where our kids are taking ownership themselves, feeling like they have their own place, feeling like they are a part of things, feeling like it's their own, you see a loss of community. And then the pandemic just put a nail in the coffin in many ways.
Yeah, tell us why you say that.
I think the pandemic really siloed people. And, we all went to live streaming. We still live stream our services here in Phoenix. I don't think it's bad to live stream, especially when you have people that are not able to come to church. But when that becomes the only way that we go to church, it becomes synthetic. It becomes something, and we need other people, it's just the reality that people need other people. We're designed to live in community. God creates in Genesis 1, male and female. And it says very clearly, man is created in the image and likeness of God. God is by definition Trinity. So if we're created in the image and likeness of a God who is by definition Trinity, who is by definition community, then we need other people in order to actually live out our creation in the image and after the likeness of God. And that's it. Full stop. When we are cut off from everyone else, we lose sight of that, and we lose everyone else, and we lose everything around us. And we felt that. Everyone was going stir crazy. And then like Pascha in 2020 was the weirdest experience ever because there were 10 people allowed in church. And that's Pascha. That's the liturgy that every other liturgy is supposed to, on Sundays is reminding us of. And to have only 10 people in church, because that's the cap that we were allowed, was hard. It was hard. It lacked some of that joy. And then to have the following year a full church was huge, absolutely amazing. And you really felt it differently.
Well, I think in terms of trying to sort of reclaim community, I think that, it begs the question of there's a lot of churches that I would say are alive in this country and across the world, and a lot that are not. And, the power of relationship. I mean, we know that kids who have even at least one adult positive mentor in their life have far better outcomes than those who don't. And the church is a beautiful place that represents this sort of intergenerational, relationships across the lifespan, that can help kids feel valued and loved and wanted in the church and have a greater, greater than their nuclear family, an entire family around them. But, I do think that, there's certain, variables that I think are necessary in a church for youth to feel this sort of active engagement in their church, knowing the vision and the purpose of church, of their faith. Why are you here? What are you taking in from the liturgy? What are you contributing to the liturgy? And then what are you going to do in the world because of the liturgy? And sort of a strategy to sort of disciple them and to teach them, how is their faith relevant in their daily lives, and I think they need a lot of well-planned programming and committed leadership and sort of authentic worship styles for these things to really, be internalized in kids and keep them there. And the youth, as you said, they kind of have to know what their role is, how they contribute, to the liturgy itself, the work of the people. What are some checks and balances for churches who may be listening today to sort of take a look at, are we a church that is alive for our youth today? Or are we missing some things that, is it an old antique fireplace that needs a log on the fire?
Yeah.
For these sort of things for our youth to actually be engaged, who may only come a few times a year, right? To get them,
Right.
to want to come that many more Sundays across the year.
Well, I think there's a lot there to unpack. First and foremost, we need to recognize that everyone has a role in liturgy. It might not be a formalized role, but everyone has a role in liturgy. And our liturgy is participatory. A lot of that gets lost in many of our American milieus when we have choirs up in a choir loft performing. I mean, they're singing complex music that is not tangible and not easy for people to sing along with and be a part of. And my background's music. I love that stuff. It's fun. But is it promoting the worship experience that the church intends when we do these things? So we have to ask ourselves that question whenever we're going through what we're doing and making decisions, specifically liturgically. So, I direct the choir here at St. George. I chant with the chanters, and I try to ask myself these questions when I'm choosing music. Am I just doing this because I like it, or am I doing this because it's something that will actually invite other people to worship? We also have to I had a priest tell me once.
That's a beautiful question, by the way. That is a beautiful
thank you.
Moment of reflection. Am I doing this because I like it, or am I doing it as an invitation to others that will help them pray? I mean, what a beautiful a beautiful reflection.
There's an old adage that in Greek says something along the lines of the devil enters the church through the chanter stand. And ironically, there's one in Russian that says the devil enters the church through the choir loft. The reality is it's the devil enters the church through our ego. And musicians are really good at having that ego. We're really good at listening to how good I sound and having our Ron Burgundy moments of everyone, come see how good I look. But why are we doing what we're doing liturgically? And then we can actually be intentional about what we're doing liturgically to provide that welcoming environment. And the same is true with our youth ministry. When we're planning events, we have to ask ourselves, I think there's 4 important questions. First and foremost, does the event support my goals? Which of course means that we have to have goals. We have to have an idea of what we're doing. But it presupposes this idea because, you should have goals for your youth ministry if you're doing youth ministry. We also need to ask ourselves what is actively being taught. What are the actual things that are being taught? Recognizing that in everything that we're doing, something is being taught, even if it's not being taught overtly in a classroom. Which leads us to question 3, what is passively being taught? And then finally, as the person that is called to this ministry, and it is ministry, we need to recognize it as ministry and reframe our idea so that we understand everything in the church is ministry. What behavior am I modeling as an agent of that ministry? So I talked to our parish council president one day, shortly after he was elected, and he told me, the ministry stuff, that's for you guys that are in the pastoral team. And I said, no, actually, everyone's job is ministry. And I take it even further. Youth ministry specifically is everybody's job. Because our youth are going to gravitate to everyone, but they're also going to see everything. Like I used to know when to cross myself because of the bracelets that the older ladies all had on their arms, and I would hear them jingling when they crossed themselves. Youth ministry is everyone's job, and kids are looking and seeing everything that's going on. And when we reframe it to see that everything we're doing is ministry, including in our worship, then we're able to find roles that we can all fit in within the life of the worship of the church. I had a priest tell me, well, not everyone's going to have a job. Like the priests need to do the things that the priests do. Oh, okay. I'm not saying that having a kid carry the basket during the collection is a threat to your priesthood. And if you think it is, then you should revisit where your priorities are and what's the environment that you're actually bringing in. Like, everyone does have a role in liturgy. And when we focus on this hyper-clericalism that often plagues us, where we lose sight of the fact that if a priest is serving the liturgy alone, nothing happens after Blessed is the Kingdom. Because after now and ever and unto ages of ages, there needs to be at least one other person there to say amen. Like, the liturgy will just stop at that moment. Then we can recognize the cooperation that everyone has in the life of the church, and then we're actually rebuilding community.
How do we break this cycle to sort of help everyone to kind of have this role? And specifically, how do we help youth want to learn about their liturgy? Do they want to learn, and how do they learn about the liturgical experience in a way that makes it them connected and engaged to the work?
First off, they have to be there, and they have to be there from the beginning. That's a challenge for a lot of people. That's a challenge for a lot of us, like, especially in ethnic communities where we think like we're on time. So I tried something new with the choir here in Phoenix. I started letting everyone know. I had a very natural break that was happening in February as my wife was getting ready to deliver and we were getting closer to her due date. I didn't want to have to, bail on the choir at the last minute on a Sunday morning. So we took a few Sundays where the choir wasn't going to sing. The chanters were going to actually sing during liturgy. So it gave me a natural buffer to then be able to say, for the first week that the choir was back, we're going to try something new. If you are not in the choir loft by the time Divine Liturgy starts, we love you, and we ask that you wait until the following week, and then we'll see you in the choir the following week. So that's a dangerous thing, because what happens if no one shows up early, or if Orthros goes a little bit short and, we start liturgy and there's no one in the choir loft? So I had to be ready for that potential. But I was amazed. Everyone that always shows up late showed up on time. And they were even early because they had something that they were a part of. They had something that was important to them. And so they made it happen. When we show our youth that liturgy is something that's important to us as a family, then we're able to make it happen. That is something that is behavior that I'm modeling. That's behavior that is being passively taught. And that is behavior that is being actively taught when we say to them, we're going to church now and we have to be on time because this is important.
Do you think, as we only have a few minutes left in our show, and I do want to encourage our listeners, if you'd like to ask Dr. Greg a question, you can do so by calling us at 1-855-237-2346 or email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That is ask@ancientfaith.com. Kind of getting back to that topic of reclaiming the community. And I love that. I just love that phrase, reclaiming the community. What steps do you think that we can take, Greg, today for our listeners that they could take not only for parish leadership that may be tuning in tonight, but also as for laity? How can we help to reclaim the community? What steps can we take tonight?
I think step one is get to church. I mean, it starts with just being there. And step two is if you see someone that's new, that you haven't seen in a while, even if there's someone that you've known for a long time, but they haven't been in a church for a while, the worst thing you can say is, where have you been? Why haven't you been there? Just say, hey, it's so good to have you here. It's so good to see you. And just start making little changes. We everything we do at St. George, we evolves around what we call E3, which we call educating, enriching, and empowering. So we have it on our wall. We have it in the bulletins. We have it everywhere. Everything is E3. In E1 is our education. And we just invite everyone to come to all of our Bible study classes. E2 is the enrichment of our life through worship. And that's the E that I'm kind of responsible for. And everything that is in that bubble, I am reframing every day trying to help everyone involved to reframe, to understand that it's ministry. And if we look at everything that we're doing as ministry and not just as something that I'm doing on a Sunday because, well, this is what we do on Sunday, then it starts. It starts to shift when people that are coming, who are doing it just because it's what we do on Sunday, they start to see something different and they start to get excited. And then when we empower people to actually get out in their communities and do something, I mean, the liturgy does that itself, right? The liturgy says at the end, let us go forth in peace, or whatever translation we might be using. But the idea is that we're sent back out into the world having been changed. Schmemann talks about the liturgy as a Taboric event, something that is like Mount Tabor. And he goes so far as to say, and just like it was good for the disciples to be there, we can't stay on Tabor. We have to go back out into the world. But we strive, just like the disciples who were on Mount Tabor saw Christ transfigured. We strive to go back into that world having been transfigured. Our job is to provide an environment where that transformation can happen for those of us that are working in the communities. And for those that are coming to the community, we need to be open to that transformation and allow ourselves to be open to being taken. Like the liturgy takes us by the hand and drags us where it wants us to go. If we're kicking and screaming, we're never going to get there. If we let the liturgy take us where it actually wants to go, if we read the prayers of the anaphora while the priest is saying them silently or saying them out loud, doesn't matter. If we're reading those prayers, especially during Lent, when we're doing the prayers of St. Basil the Great, it takes us through an entire scriptural tour de force of the entirety of salvation history. That's big. But if I'm just wondering about where I'm going to go eat next, like that's going to happen too. Like, believe me, I'm always wondering where we're going to eat after church. But then it becomes a moment to allow myself to refocus and allow myself to actually be a part of the community that I'm there to be a part of. And that's where coffee hour becomes so vital. That was the other big loss in COVID. You know, here, even after we were allowed to start having the church be opened again, losing coffee hour and losing that time, you know, that pareja, to have that opportunity to be together, that was a big loss.
And just in final question, what would you see as the role of youth ministry and Christian education? What role do they play in sort of helping us reclaim community?
I don't know if you're going to like my answer, but I think that they only play a good role if we recognize them both as extensions of the community that is built liturgically. If we think that our Christian education and our youth ministry events are the end all and be all of the lives of these kids as far as their Christian formation, then we're doing a huge disservice. We need to recognize, with regards to, you know, church school, Sunday school, Christian ed, whatever we want to call it, that stuff's important and that stuff's great, but that stuff's new. Christian education in the early church was called matins and was called vespers and was called liturgy. It was the formation that we had living in the church, living a life that was centered around the church. When you live in a village, like I was amazed, I was able to go to the village where my great-grandmother came from in Lebanon. And the church is at the center of the town. And then you make that connection when you go to any small town in New England. The church is at the center of town. The town square has the church and the municipal building all right there, and the cemetery and everything is just right there in this like church square, in this town square. They call it Church Street because that's where the church is and all of this stuff. We've lost a lot of that. And we have these other activities, educational opportunities that are beautiful, but if they're not focused back into and rather than focused back into, let's say, if they're not coming out of the general liturgical life of a parish, then that's all that they're going to be. And we're going to have the results that we keep getting.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful too, Greg, because I think for so many people, there's the ideal and then there's the real. And for many of us, I think what we as people that have platforms, whether it be your platform or our platform here, is to really kind of give, and what we hope to do at least is to try to give people the steps, the guide, the principles, really the excitement of what it means to know what the liturgy can do. Because for me, I remember growing up, much like you, if I saw it was like the wave at a football game when someone stood up, everyone else stood up. There was, or when the light was turned on, it was, but I mean, truly being actively engaged. And I think really as youth leaders that are listening and as clergy, I think it's pivotal for us to do all that we can to educate people about the power of the liturgy in our lives. And to really use what you were just saying, the 3 E's. I think that the 3 E's are actually in the divine liturgy, and how those 3 E's impact, everything that we do, and how when we come to church, the power of not only just attending church, but worshiping faithfully. The Greek word for the word worship, friends, as you're tuning in, is one of the definitions is to kiss profusely, like to just honor and venerate. I mean, and so when we come to church, we're worshiping God. There's a worshiping that takes place, this overwhelming love that we are to have. And I think, as you said earlier, for many people, when we come to church, there's, we are impacted by what we call the weapons of mass distraction. We're just distracted a lot. And so I think that, I think what you're doing is you're really lighting, a flame within all of us, Greg. And I hope that as our listeners are tuning in, is, take advantage of it. Go online, read about the divine liturgy. Don't just read it though, but also pray it, and then make it, let it be something that's alive in you. Because if not, what we're just talking about simply stays at the macro level, and it becomes information, but not transformation. And I think that's the key that I think for all of us to remember. We've got a few moments left, Greg. If you had some final comments that you'd like to leave with our listeners tonight, I know that you've been such a wealth of knowledge, but I'd love to give you the last word.
Oh, you're awesome, Father. I really appreciate that. I just really think it's to your point. We need to allow that life of the church to infuse us. It's funny you say the word for worship, and you gave that beautiful definition. It has as its core energy in it. I mean, proskinisomen. We worship, and that's the word that we're invited. That's the word that is used to come and invite us to come and worship and fall down before Christ. And then we're actually invited in the liturgy to stand before his throne and are given the opportunity to sit at the feet of the Master, the way that we hear from Mary and Luke, and be taught and be fed. And then we're sent back into the world to be changed, and to hopefully change the world and show people a different way, to show to people that there is more to life than the mumbo jumbo you see on CNN or Fox or Facebook or anywhere else. There is a life that is the life that God has laid out for us, and we have the opportunity to participate in that. And we just welcome everyone to do that.
Greg, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I really appreciate just on a number of levels your wisdom, your passion, and obviously your love for the church, and just really, and for our youth, and being able to just deposit that into all of us and to all of our listeners. And so I look forward to having you on the show again in the future for sure. And I thank you.
Thank you so much,
us.
Father.
Absolutely. And please give our love to Diana and your 2 children, and to Father Chris. Give them all our love, and just great work that you guys are doing out there.
Thank you very much, Father. Thank you, Presbytera, for this opportunity. This has been a blast.
Thank you, brother.
We enjoyed it so much.
We also want to thank Matushka Trudy for producing tonight's show. She does just an amazing job every single week. And thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. We do encourage you, as we did at the top of the show, to join our social media pages. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, all of them under the Louhs title. And we also invite you to go subscribe to listening to our sermons. You can find them all on our YouTube channel at the Louhs edifyfaith.com. Next week, we're going to be speaking with an extraordinary deacon who's going to talk to us about how do we cultivate compassionate love for mental health and healing. You definitely don't want to miss that show. So we'll see you all next Tuesday right here on Ancient Faith Radio. God bless you all and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan, which can be purchased at store.ancientfaith.com. Their daily inspirational messages can be found at thelouhs.com/subscribe. Be sure also to search for The Louhs on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Live with the Louhs is a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio.
Hey, Father Tom.
Hi, Father Nick. How are you?
I'm doing great, brother. How are you doing?